welcome teams. For the hydrodynamic season, we expect teams to complete a two-part annual challenge, what we do, while learning and practicing our core values, how we do what we do. In the robot game, First LEGO League teams must solve a series of water-themed missions on our field. The details of each mission are found in the challenge, and the rules of the robot game are located in the challenge guide. Make sure you have those documents along with the challenge updates we'll release periodically throughout the season. Teams also embark on a project. This year, teams have been asked to identify a problem within the human water cycle, design a solution that makes this problem better, and share the problem and solution with others. The challenge outlines your project essentials, those elements you want to make sure you include. The challenge guide gives greater details and resources. If you're a new team, you will want to read both documents very carefully, as well as those challenge updates. If you're a veteran team, you may not need some of the information in the challenge guide. Of course, we expect teams to exemplify our core values throughout their work in the season. Today's expert is Candace Rainwater, First LEGO League Global Judge Advisor. Dr. Candace Rainwater is a former member of First Robotics Competition Hall of Fame Team 16, the Bomb Squad. She is an alumnus of the University of Arkansas, and she has a PhD in chemistry from the University of Florida. Currently, she is a clinical assistant professor in the freshman engineering program at the University of Arkansas. She is the judge advisor for First LEGO League Arkansas. And now I'm going to turn the presentation over to our expert and let her tell you more. Candace, are you there?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself.
That's all right.
So good afternoon, teams, and I'm very excited that you joined us today, and I'll be doing an overview of judging for you guys today. Go to the first slide, please. All right, so let's start with our outline. We're going to talk about what to expect in judging with core values, project, and robot design. I'll also give you a little overview of awards and the awards breakdowns depending on the size of tournament you have and the criteria that you would need to advance from a first level tournament up to maybe second level, and then depending on your region up to your championship. Next slide, please. All right, so our overall view of judging, remember that you will be in 3 judging sessions. Each of these sessions will be 10 minutes each, and remember the judge sessions are project, core value, and robot design. What's really important for you guys to remember when you're at a tournament is to be on time. Make sure you know where you're going, make sure you show up on time, and that you're ready to go. Being ready to go means bringing all your materials with you. Typically, when you're at a tournament, what you're going to find is that the judging area is going to be separate from your pit area, and the pit area is where you keep your robot and all of your materials. And when you go to judging, you typically will go back to back to back judging sessions with a 5-minute break in between each, and so you will not have time to go back to your pit to get the next set of materials, and so you want to make sure to take everything with you, have your robot with you, have your computer with you for the programs, have your your core values poster, and all of your props and anything that you would need for your project presentation. You must follow the spectator policy. That policy will be set by your partner and the director of your tournament. And so in some tournaments they allow people to go into the rooms. Some don't have enough space, so you only can bring so many people. So whatever your spectator policy is, you should be told that by your tournament director. And so please make sure you follow that policy. For each of your judging sessions, the judges will complete rubrics, and this will give you a really great feedback on where the judges believe your accomplishment level is, and also give you great comments about what they really loved and what they think you could do better. So definitely make sure at the end of your tournament that you pick up those rubrics and that you read them and look at the constructive criticism as well as the praise that they give you there. All right, next slide, please. Here are a few examples of what a judging room would look like. Depending on where you are, typically with core values, you would be in some kind of self-contained classroom, but you may also be in an area, a larger area that's been draped off. In the core values area, you would typically have a table that would have the core values activity on it, and also a place for you to put your core values poster. There's a little more variation when it comes to project and robot design. Project will also be in either a room, or you may even be in like an auditorium shown there. That would be a place for you to go in, do your presentation, and then talk to the judges. Depending on where you are, you may or may not get a table, so you should check that information from your regional director or your tournament director. And you may or may not have power, and you may or may not have access to a projector, so you should always make sure that whatever your project is, that it's something you can present with technology is usually the best bet, just depending on where you are. Robot design, you will be either in a room or in the area where the game is happening, and that's where you will be judged on your robot's design. And so there will be a table available for you to demonstrate some of the programming and the attachments and the missions that you have accomplished over the season. All right, next slide, please. Let's start with core values. So in the 10-minute core value session, you would get up to 5 minutes for the teamwork activity. That is completely dependent on the tournament and the type of activity that's been planned. So you usually will get information about that from your tournament director beforehand. But basically what happens, the doors will open and your students will go in, the team will go in, and there's typically either some place where they have listed the activity on a piece of paper. Your students should go right up to that piece of paper, read the directions, and then complete the teamwork activity as specified. Usually there is a timer. The judges sometimes will prompt you, sometimes they won't, but it's usually best to go straight in, and if they say it's okay, go ahead and start that activity. Some good advice that I would give is, as coaches, you should practice teamwork activities. Go online, Google teamwork activity, modify it, but find something that you can help your students prepare to working together in a small amount of time, making a plan, getting ready to go, and just displaying how they work together as a team while they're under pressure. After the teamwork activity is completed, then you'll get approximately 2 minutes for your core values poster. Make sure you cover all the information that is required in the core values poster, and a great way to make sure you are doing those things and keeping track of them is to have a camera available in your practices. Make sure any kind of activity that you guys do together that you're taking pictures. It's a great way to put that on that poster. It's a great visual representation, but it's also a great visual cue for your students, because if they get kind of messed up talking about it, they can look and see what the next thing was and get back on track. And then after those two things are done, the judges will use the remaining amount of time to ask questions about things that they maybe were not able to tell based off of your poster or the teamwork activity. And then usually you'll be dismissed, and then the judges will have 5 minutes, and then you go on to your next session. I think at this time we'll allow anybody to ask some general questions about core values judging if you have them.
So just a reminder for the audience, please use the question box to type in your questions. I'll give you a minute to do that. Candace, we have a question from the audience,
Okay.
and I think it's based off of the slide. Are costumes judged during the core values session?
Typically, they are not judged during the core value sessions. They may ask you about why you're dressed up, but a lot of the times our teams will go from project into core values, and they just leave their costumes on because it's a short time to switch over. But if it is something that has to do with your core values, I mean that you mention and that's why you're wearing them, then they fold it in. But in general, I think that the judges are 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 judging mainly on the activity and the poster and not necessarily the appearance of the team while they're there.
Great, thank you, Candace. And we have another question from the audience. They're wondering how they would know what the teamwork activity is. They didn't see it in the overview.
Okay. So the teamwork activity is not known until you walk into the room. So the point of the activity is to see how your team reacts when given a problem and has to quickly solve it as a team in a short period of time. So for practice ones, I just always, when I'm helping other teams, I Google a certain activity. So that's why practicing is really important, because it's going to be, you're not going to know what it is until you walk into that room.
Okay, and another question. This is coming from someone whose region doesn't use the core values poster. So they're wondering how they would be judged.
So if they don't use the core values poster, then they'll do the teamwork activity, and then typically then if you want to make like a small presentation about your core values, you can, but otherwise then the judges would just spend the rest of the time asking you questions in order to get an idea of how you've accomplished the various other spaces that were left, or the areas left on the rubric.
Okay, so we do have a few more questions from the audience, but in the interest of time, we're going to move on, and we can save some of the questions for the end of the presentation.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide, please. All right, so second area in judging would be project. Project is also a 10-minute session. 5 minutes includes your project presentation. Keep in mind that does include setup, so you would want to have your students before they walk in dressed in their costumes if you have costumes, if you have props, things that need to be set up, ready to go, so as they walk into the judging area they can quickly as a team get everything set up and ready to go. Typically in project, the judges are just waiting for you to go. If you get set up and you just stand there, they would prompt you, but they kind of just go ahead and turn on the timer the second the last person gets in to the door and they close it. So use that time wisely, get everything set up and ready to go, and have your team just start giving their presentation. Tips on presentation. Remember that the presentation, I believe, because I've done a lot of project judging, should be fun. It should be, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be completely polished. It needs to be something that looks like, the kids did it, they had a great time doing it, and they're having a really good time presenting the information. So because that's what I look for when I judge project. But you also need to make sure that your team gets all the information out during the project presentation. So they really need to make sure that they clearly state what their problem was that they selected, what their solution was, and how they shared it, because those are the three main really important things that allow you to be in the running for project awards, is being able to identify those things easily. Keep in mind, you may have issues with power and things like that. So I don't think in general it's always the best idea to use something that needs a projector or a PowerPoint presentation, because you just never know if you're going to have technical difficulties and you may not get your project off and your presentation off, because they will cut you off at the 5-minute mark. So do something that's fun and that's creative but doesn't necessarily need electronics to do it. A lot of teams I've seen in the past will use iPads, and if they need something digital, they have the iPad available and they go through that. Keep in mind, it has to be a live presentation. Everybody must be included in the presentation, and you cannot record your presentation ahead of time and show it to the judges. They want to see it live. In the last 5 minutes, the judges will ask questions and make sure that they cover all of the areas on the rubric to see how you've accomplished those areas over the time. And so that's really all the information I have about project. I'll be happy to take questions about project now.
Okay, Candace, so I have a question from the audience. It's geared toward rookie teams, and the question is, for rookies with strong leaders, what's the best advice you would have to make sure that everyone has a chance to participate in the presentation?
So if you have people, team members that are strong leaders, I would definitely, as a team, go ahead and have a script, know what people are going to say, and make sure, because a lot of times when we do presentations, when I've seen presentations, there are characters, right? Everybody's a different character or something, and so a great way to keep it even is to have it scripted out. Know what you're going to talk about and make it pretty even amongst the teams on who talks when and the information they provide.
Okay, great. And another question from the audience. Do students sometimes present a skit?
I think most of the time when I've watched project presentations, it's a skit, because it's a great way to get the information out and also have it be creative, and it allows the teams to really infuse the personality of the team into their presentation. So skits are very popular, songs are popular, and so a skit is a fantastic way to give your presentation.
Okay, great. And what are some examples of how to share your presentation with others?
That's a great question. So remember, when sharing, sharing needs to be outside of your actual team itself. So the first level of sharing is to talk to your friends, talk to your family members, let them know about your problem and how you're trying to solve it. So that's like the base level. The next great way to share is to talk to your classmates, do your presentation at your school. And remember, sharing doesn't have to be your entire full 5-minute presentation. Sharing is going to a group, talking to them about the problem and how to solve it. Another great thing about sharing is getting experts, talking to people in the field. That's a great way to share. It's a great way to get information. Also, Facebook, Twitter, social media of any kind is a fantastic way to share with a large amount of people without a massive amount of effort. But trying to share with the group, or whatever your problem is, and whoever would benefit from the solution of your problem, that's a fantastic way to also share, is to talk to those people and see what they need and see what they want and see how they, how much they would benefit from the solution to your problem.
Thank you. And one more question for the project section right now. What if a team has a really shy person who doesn't want to speak during the presentation? Do you have any suggestions about that?
So I've seen that in the past, and sometimes you can cleverly get them involved by signage, or instead of maybe talking, if they, if you're doing a skit that had to do with animals or something where they're interacting, but they don't necessarily have to be talking to interact. That's a great way to include somebody who's really nervous about talking.
Okay, thank you, Candace. So I'm going to move forward to the next slide.
Okay, robot design. So robot design, you also have 10 minutes. You should, depending on your area, if you have to do the robot design executive summary, depending on what area you're in, it's typically less than 4 minutes. That includes information about your robot and how you designed it and the different types of programming things that you've done there. The rest of the time, during that time, you can demo your robot, but also after that, the judges may ask you to demo certain missions of your robot, and they're usually asking you questions about your robot while you're demonstrating your robot. So remember, when you go out to judging, bring your robot, bring all the attachments that you would need, and also either bring out a printout of your programming or a computer that has the programming that you can easily get to, so you can explain the programming to the judges, because that's one of the important areas, and so they're going to want to see the programming, and they want to be able to see that the students can explain the programming, but also the process of how they got the robot to that point and why they decided what missions to run and in what order to run them in. So you will have a table available, and you'll be able to run those missions. So make sure your robot is charged, make sure it's with you, and that's basically it for robot design. So I can answer specific questions about robot design judging.
Okay, so the first question that came in is, if something goes wrong with the robot during judging, are the kids expected to work on it and then bring it back in? How does that work?
So no, if something goes wrong, what typically they will have you do is try to run the mission again. And if it goes wrong again, then what they would have you do is explain to them what's going on, what it normally does, and because we just know the robots aren't 100% reliable. The judges understand that, and so you remember that robot design judging isn't necessarily about how well your robot works every single time, because they know it's not going to work 100% of the time. What they're mostly interested in is the process you use to get there, and how the kids how they came up with their ideas, and how they brainstormed them, and how they designed the robot then from there, and then how they've the troubleshooting. So they don't expect you to be perfect. But you will not end up going back. What would happen is, if you were in the running for an award, then the judges typically will come out in the afternoon to watch your robot run on the field, especially if there was something that was going wrong. They may come back and watch you to see that specifically.
Thanks, Candace. Another question that just came in is from an elementary school team, and they won't have a design available for every mission. So what should they do if they're asked about one of the missions that they didn't complete?
That's okay. So what you only have to present the ones that you know you're going to do, and it is okay if you have decided that based on your skill level and what's happening, that these are the missions that we decided to focus on. So you will be able to help tailor that session by letting the judges know that these were the missions we focused on, and here is why, and here's how we designed them, and here is what we used to run them. So that's okay.
Another question, is there a typical number of missions that gets completed by a single team?
I don't know that answer, to tell you the truth, because with being a judge advisor, I'm always in the back. I never actually get to see the missions that have run, and I've never actually judged robot design myself, so I don't know, to tell you the truth. I'm sorry. I don't know if Kathy knows.
Okay, well, this is Christina. So we know that every team is different, and some missions are more complicated than others. So it's really based on the individual team from what we've found. And just another question, is it okay for teams to use a robot design that they found online?
Yes, it's fine to use that as your base to get started. And if you use a specific design and you didn't modify it, then you definitely would want to make sure you let the judges know and give credit to the people that you found that design from. If you use it as a base and then modify from there, you can, let the judges know, well, this is where this was our starting point, but these were all the changes that we made in order to make sure that we completed this mission or that mission, or we wanted to do that. So it's fine to start with somebody else's starter bot, as long as you A, give them credit, or B, modify from that starting point.
Thanks, Candace. So we'll try to circle back on some of these questions, but now for the sake of time, I'm going to advance to the next slide.
All right, so let's talk about award structures. There are two types of award structures, depending on the size of your tournament, or whether it's a championship tournament or a qualifying tournament. So most of the time for your smaller qualifying tournaments, you will see that there's a consolidated award structure. And what will happen in those tournaments, at those award ceremonies, is that there will be one award given for core values, one for robot design, one for project, and there will also be an overall award, which is called the Champions Award. And so in order to be considered for the Champions Award, you have to have been ranked high in all three categories: core values, robot design, and project. And then you had to be in the top 40% of the robot performance scores for the tournament on that day. And so that's one of each of those awards, which we call the core awards. And then there's also the Robot Performance Award, which is separate from the judging overall. It's just the team who has scored the highest amount of points in the official robot runs during that day. During the core awards, the teams can only win one core award. Since robot design is a separate award and is not judged, you may have a team who wins a core award and also the robot performance award if they just happen to have the highest score. You may also get some judges and some local awards, and typically an outstanding volunteer or coach mentor award at those tournaments. So for larger qualifying tournaments, and definitely for championships, there'll be a full award structure where you will have 3 core awards for each set of awards. So for core values, you have inspiration, a teamwork award, and a gracious professionalism award. And for robot design, you'll have a mechanical design, programming, strategy and innovation award. And for project, you'll have a research and innovative solution and a presentation award. So once again, within that set of awards, including the champions, you can only win one core award. Champions, again, would be someone who ranked high in core values, robot design, and project judging, and it also was in the top 40% of the robot performance for that day. Also in the full structure, you would get a team would be awarded robot performance overall. And then there's the secondary, not necessarily secondary awards, but other awards such as judges awards, local awards, outstanding volunteer, and coach mentor awards as well. All right, I'm good with that one, so we can go to the next slide. Okay, so how awards are determined. The judges will rank the teams that they see based on the information provided in the 10-minute judging session and how well you scored on your rubrics. So each set of judges will bring back a ranking of the teams that they saw that day. Then they would meet up with any other judges from that same area, talk about the teams, and do an overall ranking based off of that. So it's not a numerical thing. It is not like you get 5 points for this and 4 points for this. It is an overall impression based off of how you did on the actual rubrics and during that session. So those teams get ranked overall. And then those overall rankings then help decide who gets the actual, like if there's first, second, third place awards in those categories. And then, like I said, robot performance is completely separate and it's just based off of the score that your robot scored during the official runs. Depending on how the tournament goes, so you can do it, the judges will do an overall ranking, and if they have additional questions, so if they have a tie between they don't know who's first place, then they may go out and talk to those teams again with the other judges all together to help decide the overall winners of each category for the actual award ceremony. Okay, I'm good on that slide. There is information available to you for advancement, so in a qualifying tournament, what you would need to be able to do to advance to the next level of tournament is you must compete in all 3 areas of judging, so core values and presentation and robot design. And then you would also compete in the robot game, and you would have to be in the top 75% of your robot performance for the teams at the tournament that day, and that would allow you to then move on to the next set of tournaments. So do keep in mind, if you have win the Robot Performance Award but you don't have the core values poster and it was required, or a robot executive summary and that was required, or you didn't share because that's required for your presentation, that would knock you out of being able to advance to the next level of the tournament. So make sure that you participate in all 3 areas, because everything is important, not just the robot itself, and that your robot can score in the top 75% of teams that are there that day. All right, good there? Okay, so we have lots of resources available for you to prepare for judging. Also, we have an email address, FLO Judge, that you can email, ask questions to us. So make sure that you are getting into those links and that you are looking at the rubrics, looking at the frequently asked questions. Make sure you're covering all those small things before you head out to judging and to your tournament. Is that the last one? Oh, questions, yay.
Great. So thank you so much, Candace. We're opening it up to questions. We're just collecting some from the audience here.
Sure.
Okay, and just a quick note, we have uploaded the rubrics to the chat section in the webinar. So we do suggest that you review all of those. They're available in the chat section here. They're also posted on our website. So the first question we have is, how detailed and how viable should a project solution be?
So I think it varies. I mean, typically, because I've seen, I start from the qualifying tournaments and going up. You want to make sure that your solution is something that is innovative. So that doesn't mean that your solution isn't like somebody else, but you've taken it a step further. You are not required to have a prototype or working prototype of your solution if that's what it's going to be, but it needs to be fairly well thought out. So if you want to be ranked high on solution and then what, how viable your solution is, you definitely want to have, make sure that there is an expert who said that's a viable solution and it would help people, but you don't have to necessarily have tested it out yet. You may want to have a plan for how you would like to test it or how you would like to implement it and how much money it would cost to implement and who you would need worker-wise to implement it, but you don't have to have implemented it to get the highest rankings on the rubric, if that makes sense.
Another question that we received is, how can they find a problem for this year's challenge? And I can speak to that. We have a new series on the First LIGO League blog about extended resources that dive into the challenge topic. The address for that is fllblog.wordpress.com. The internet is a great place to do some research, and then, of course, your challenge guide as well. And the field also represents real problems, so you can look to the mission models for some inspiration. And just another question for you. This team wants to know if they have to discuss the modifications they make during the robot design judging.
I mean, if you started with somebody else's starter bot and then modified from there, you definitely should at least briefly discuss how you've modified that robot. I think it's always a good idea to talk about any modifications that you've made because that's part of the process, and so it's a great way to talk about what you modified and why you modified it, and that's, because that's really what robot design focuses on.
So just a quick reminder for the audience, the chat function is in the control part of the webinar. So that's where you can pose your questions. You have a couple more coming in just one moment.
Okay.
So just another housekeeping thing, we will put the blog address out through the chat function as well. As for another question that we just had come in, is there a limit to the amount of parts that they use in the robot design?
No, there is not a limit to how many parts you use. I mean, there are limits on motors and things like that, so you have to check those things out. But as for pieces, no. But always remember, you want to be carrying those things around. Makes it, the more pieces you have, the more difficult it is. If you drop it, that's the more pieces you have to put back together. The judges aren't looking for something to be complicated just for the sake of being complicated, when you could do something and do it well with a simple mechanism or a simple attachment. So keep those things in mind. Make your life easier. Try to do it with the fewest amount of pieces possible. That just makes things easier for you and for your team as they switch things out and have to carry it around.
And just another note, the allowable parts that teams can use are listed in the challenge guide. So we're going to put the link out to that in the chat as well. Another great question from the audience, can a team bring a printout of their programming instead of the actual EV3 software?
Yes, you definitely can bring a printout. It's also a great way for you to be able to, if you have an extra copy, to leave it with the judges so they have more time to look at your programming later on. So yeah, if you don't want to bring a computer, that's a great way to present your programming, is to have a printout of it.
We're also seeing some questions about the robot design executive summary, and we suggest looking at the challenge guide. There are a lot of details about it in there. So getting some more questions coming in here, just taking a second to collect those. Just bear with me for one moment.
Okay.
Okay, so another question that just came in is, should a team consider building a second robot?
My question would be, why, with what for what purpose? I don't, you know, I think it just depends on what you want to use the robot for. I mean, if you have maybe a working robot, I've seen teams who build a second robot, maybe early in the season they have a robot that they like that works pretty well, but they want to make some pretty drastic changes for later on for an additional tournament later in the season, but they keep their original one just in case their modifications and their ideas don't work well, so they don't have to tear that robot apart and start all over again. But otherwise, I'm not 100% sure how having two robots would necessarily help you, it's probably best to focus on the one robot that you're going to have, in the judging and work well, hopefully, on the mat.
Great, thanks, Candace. So we're also seeing a lot of questions coming in about individual events. Teams are wondering how they'll know what they should bring to an event and the length of the tournament. Those questions are best answered by the event organizer. So they will be reaching out to teams in advance of the event with that information, but you would want to speak with the event organizers directly so you know exactly what's expected of you at the event that you'll be attending. Another note about event organizers, they will also provide you with a schedule so you'll have an idea of how the day will go. Okay, so thank you everyone for your questions, and thank you, Candace, for answering those burning questions. We are coming up to the last 10 minutes of the webinar, and Candace, we would love if you could share some best practices that you've seen from teams as we start to think about wrapping up. If you do have any advice that you could share or things that you've seen that may inspire teams as they're on their hydrodynamics journey?
Well, since I kind of come from the judge advisor standpoint, I see things happen that I think with a little bit of coaching could make things the day go smoother for teams. So coaches, really make sure that as you're getting ready to go in for judging, that you remind your students before they go in what they're going to be judged on, what room they're about to go into, and what they need to kind of focus on, because I think sometimes the kids go up and they're like, okay, it's project, and then they walk into the project room and they kind of just stand there and stare at the judges because they're not sure what they're supposed to be doing. So just a little bit of coaching there makes things go really smooth for the judges and also for the students, and it helps maximize their time. We see lots of teams and we don't get a whole lot of time, so the more time that we get with you as a team, the more helpful it is to you and also for the judges. Project-wise, because I've done a lot of project judging, if you are looking for a great way to, if you're like a new team and you're just kind of getting started, a great way to include everybody and in a presentation is to set up your presentation like a newscast, and that allows you to interview various people and do various things and make it interesting. So that's always a great baseline way to start if you're a new team and looking for a way to present the information without just kind of standing there and reading off of note cards. I won't lie, I've always loved it when the team comes up with like a song or something that helps me remember them and their presentation. And so those are always fun ways to get to know a team. Keep in mind though, depending on where you are and what's around you, don't go in screaming or yelling or clapping too loud, because you want to be respectful to the other people that are judging around you. Core values. I think the biggest thing for core values is practice. Practice doing activities together in a short period of time where the team has to get the activity, come up with a plan, right? It's great. The very first thing they should really do as a team is come up with a plan and then execute that plan in front of the judges to the best of their ability. And that's not an easy thing to do, especially with younger students. So the more you can practice, the better you are. And it doesn't have to be something difficult. You could be something as easy as writing a list of 10 things on the board and asking them as a team to rank them from most important to least important. It's amazing how you can get a lot out of a team just by something that simple. Robot design, I think I'm of the keep it simple faction there. Do it well, but do it simply. I think that is more impressive than having something that's a monster claw or monster programming that could have been done in a simple, more elegant way. And with robot design or playing the robot game, it's hard. It's not always going to work out great. Your robot sometimes is going to go on the fritz, but take deep breaths and try again, because that's the judges aren't expecting it to be perfect every time. So we're looking at how, as a team, you guys kind of overcome adversity and keep trying and keep having fun, because it's really what we want you guys to do is to have fun with this, even though it's hard, right? But it's you as coaches are going to be exhausted by the end of the tournament, but you're going to be so proud of those kids. I mean, they do such amazing things, and every time I've sat in a judging session and we talk about how absolutely amazing the group of kids are and what they've taught us. So know that they're definitely touching the lives of the judges, just in just that small amount of time. I think that's mainly what I have. I can talk more on something else specifically if you want me to.
Great. Well, that was excellent advice. Thank you so much, Candace. It does look like we're just about wrapped up here, so we will start to end things for the day. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us live and any coaches or teams who might be watching this recording. We will post the recording of this webinar to our resource library, which lives on our website at firstinspires.org. Thank you to our global sponsors who are seen here, and especially to our strategic partner, LEGO Education. And thank you again, Candace, for sharing information about judging with our teams. And thanks to all of our coaches and teams out there. Good luck, everyone. We hope you have a great season.